Hi, this is Danny Doyle, and the free play LTC is canceled. I know. I'm sorry that it's come to this, and maybe I will eventually get back to it and try to resolve it. But I have run into far too many issues. And honestly, I'm just kind of upset and sick of it at this point, and I've just decided it's over. We're done. We're not doing it. Let me go into the various issues that we ran into. First off, I already missed 2 weeks in a row, which did an amount to kill the momentum. Those were not related to anything with the free to LTC. It was more because I was doing the charity stream, and that was, a big event, a big ordeal, one that I'm very happy with, but it took a lot of energy to set up and a lot more energy to finish, and it just completely drained me. So I just sort of wasn't doing it for a couple of, for 2 weeks specifically, and it just sort of, it pulled a lot of the momentum away from the playthrough. And then, when I got back to trying to do it, I was at probably my least favorite map in the entire game, and that is Village of Silence. Theoretically, this map should be fairly interesting to route, because it is a route map with mountains, so you take advantage of warp and flyers, and a lot of enemies who you want to kill as quickly as possible, and those maps are more interesting, in my opinion, for the free play LTC than the seize and kill boss maps, because they basically just amount to warping a strong unit, having that strong unit take care of the one thing that needs to be done, warping the Lord and seizing, right? Like, I much prefer having to rely on an entire squad. And I had a rather interesting clear planned out. Unfortunately, that is also a problem. So, like, there's two things, right? Or I guess there's three things that make this map, like, frustrating to do with the clear. The first is these goddamn spiders. They have one move because they're on the mountains, and they have incredibly high avoid. Basically, my high skill units were still only getting like 30s on them. So I run into the situation of, am I going to repeatedly rig and try to kill the spiders while they're on the mountain? Am I going to wait for this guy and this guy, multiple fucking turns of them just walking one tile at a time before I actually kill them when they're not on the peak? Or am I going to do what ultimately is the solution that I decided on, give javelins 255 hit so that I have the ability to hit them. So I'm already compromising on my reliability threshold that I decided on. But I was like, hey, it's a free play LTC. The idea is to find the theoretical turn limit, and setting the hit rates to not be a factor is a way to do that. I don't feel great about it because I do kind of like how the hit rates being a factor did cause some things. Like, for example, I sent Cormag in the Creeping Darkness map. I sent Cormag to a specific place because I knew that his unreliability meant that he wasn't suited for the jobs where I needed him to hit every time, and instead he was suited for a job where he's facing 50s, but he needs to hit one of them and he has 4 chances, right? So, like, it did make the reliability being a factor did make some of the clears more interesting, in my opinion. It also led to, using the Silver Sword on Hayden instead of the Killing Edge. Like, there's a couple of times that it came up, and I thought it was really useful. Or, not useful, but, like, interesting. But I decided, fuck it. Like, we're going for the turn floor. We do it with the spiders. So then we run into the second issue. A fuck ton of these enemies are just non-aggressive. The boss is non-aggressive. A lot of people over here, this guy's non-aggressive. There's a lot of really annoying non-aggressive enemies. Meaning that using the whole warp position javelins with 255 hit to route the map is not going to be as foolproof of a strategy. It just becomes a bunch of well, now I actually have to attack this guy on player phase, which means that I can't complete... it made the map more annoying to clear. I guess it's technically more difficult, but to me that's not fun difficulty when in LTCing. It is just annoying. It means that suddenly, for arbitrary AI reasons, the turn floor is now higher than it was before. But then we run into the third issue that is ultimately what caused me to cancel the free play LTC. And is also the reason why, like, because those things all came up very quickly, right? But I'm like, fine, I'll just do the clear, whatever. The biggest issue is this unit right here, and this looks like Natasha. This is Natasha. Natasha is replacing Saleh. Saleh is, for those who don't know, force deployed on this map. That's his slot. Initially, I had a combat unit replacing Natasha, and the reason for that is these reinforcements, these sort of zone-based reinforcements right here, I wanted Saleh to be able to contribute to killing them, right? So why is it Natasha? Well, that's because there's something weird going on with FE Builder and editing Saleh. No matter what I do, Saleh's replacement is a Sage. Now, I have already used the only Sage in the game, Saleh. I used him earlier in the Inez map. I think he replaced Inez, actually, but that's because I needed him for Creeping Darkness. I needed his staff rank and extra magic. Him and Mulder were, like, part of that clear. I needed him to be able to reach a specific tile with the torch. He's not replaceable. He's non-negotiable. I can't have him be here. Initially, I replaced him with, I believe it was, I can't remember. It might have been Dosla. I think I already used Dosla. Some combat fucker. Some okay at combat person. And I was like, they're going to contribute a little bit on this map because they're forced deployed and that's it. Right? I couldn't, though. Because he's a Sage for some reason, instead of whatever class he was. Now, my initial thoughts on that were, okay, well, maybe because of the way that Creeping Dark, like Village of Silence, is loaded immediately after Creeping Darkness, I need to redo Creeping Darkness, because I'm already in the preps of Village of Silence, so any changes I make don't happen. So I replayed Chapter 11, and I made sure to copy my strategies so that the experience and item usages and everything wouldn't be changed. I actually had to rig RNG so that I had to rig RNG so that I didn't get more or less experience, because I wanted to align it exactly. And now Saleh is still a Sage. Saleh's replacement was still a Sage. So I'm like, well, that's weird. Well, maybe it has something to do with, like, Chapter 11 and 12. So I go and I reload Distant Blade. I re-clear Distant Blade, I re-clear Creeping Darkness. I come back here, still a Sage. At this point, I'm incredibly confused. I'm like, was Saleh, like, present on the map at some point earlier? And I look in the story and no, that's not the case. So I start the playthrough over from scratch, and I meticulously copy all of my moves and rig it so that I don't land crits when I hadn't before, and that I miss when I didn't, and I get everything perfectly lined up, right? Really time consuming, really obnoxious, but I'm like, if we start from a clean save file, at the very least then, Saleh will be changed. Because you might notice, right? Like, so when you're editing people on the map, let's say this Death Goyle, right? He is the monster, which is the unit number, and he changes to his default. But he also has a class, Gargoyle. So for this, Natasha, which is the Saleh replacement, I have the class set to 0, which means that she should just be Natasha. And if we go under unit number, Natasha's default class is Cleric, right here. Cleric. No, we're not editing the, okay, we're just closing, we're not editing. But for some reason, this slot wants to be a Sage, no matter fucking what. Even starting from a fresh save file, it's staying a Sage. I am sort of at my wit's end in terms of trying to change Saleh into something other than a Sage. And I just gave up. Like, that was just sort of the last straw for me, is that I did an entire super time-consuming playthrough up to this point in order to make sure it matched perfectly. Still a Sage. So then I was like, okay, well, why don't we try to find a clear such that we don't need to use this unit. It doesn't exist. Unfortunately, that costs us an extra turn to not be able to make use of that slot. And also, I kind of don't want to have, like, a unit who's been edited into a class they literally can't be. Like, it's against my rules. So a combination of those two things just led me to the point where I'm frustrated at this playthrough, and I don't want to continue it. Just another reason why Village of Silence is the worst map in Sacred Stones. I don't know what's going on. If anyone who has familiarity with Effie Builder could tell me why on earth, no matter what I do, this unit is a Sage. It shows up as Natasha. It shows up as Natasha Sage. And the inventory changes. But it's still a Sage. And I've even tried doing, like, changing the class in here, right? To force a change. Like, now it's General Natasha, right? And on the map, on Effie Builder, this looks like General. But booting up the game, Sage. No idea why. So maybe my copy of Effie Builder is cursed. Every copy of Sacred Stones is different. Every copy has been personalized. And mine has been personalized to say, fuck you, Danny. Anyway, yeah, sorry about that. Probably not the greatest video for people who were the fans of the LTC. And I'm disappointed that I'm not going to be completing the run. But if you are an LTCer and you know more about Effie Builder than me and you're interested in completing the run, like, I highly encourage you to attempt it. Because it was very fun until we got to Village of Silence. Which I think is pretty commonly, at least for LTCers, a very hated map. And is a reason why perhaps we would want to go Ephraim route instead. And maybe I'll plan out an Ephraim route one eventually. But until then, we do have, for the Sacred Stones heads, a new playthrough coming up, a new secondary playthrough. That'll start next Saturday, but it is a Sacred Stones playthrough. And it involves, I want to tease, I want to make a tease. It is a Sacred Stones playthrough where we'll be seeing quite a few blank level ups. I'll say that much. Toodles poodles.